you ever sat in a lecture hall furiously scribbling notes and suddenly thought to yourself, wait a minute, does the professor actually agree with this theory they're talking about, or do they secretly think it's total garbage? It's a pretty relatable mystery, right? I mean, picture this. You write down a theory word for word. You study it like it's an absolute fact. And then you proudly use it on your final exam, only to get your paper back and realize, well, the professor only brought up that theory because they thought it was a complete joke. We have all been there. So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats and focusing in on Lesson 56, Recognizing Spoken Evaluation. We're going to decode the hidden language academic speakers use to tell you exactly what they think without ever actually saying, I like this or I hate this. Ready? Let's dive right in. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll uncover the hidden lecture language. Then we'll look at the main culprits behind this secret code, decoding evaluative adjectives, followed by the power of adverbs. After that, we'll get into spotting spoken punctuation, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with a toolkit for mastering active listening. All right, Section 1, the hidden lecture language. You see, when you're listening to a presentation, it is incredibly rare for an academic expert to just stand at a podium and bluntly state, this solution is terrible. Academia is all about extreme nuance. Instead, they use a highly specific, very subtle vocabulary to communicate their true stance. And if you aren't listening for it, you might just write down the facts and completely miss the actual point. To really grasp this hidden language, we first need to define what we mean by evaluation. Evaluation is the speaker's subjective, evidence-based response to an idea or theory. Notice the tension there between subjective and evidence-based? That's because evaluation isn't just some random emotional opinion. It's a calculated judgment. In the academic world, professionals are practically required to hide their personal opinions behind data. They can't just rant, so this hidden code was born. By evaluating a topic, the speaker is subtly assigning value, telling you just how effective, reliable, or influential an idea truly is, all while keeping that professional polish. This comparison brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Listen to this first sentence. The argument relies heavily on a purely relative notion. Now, compare that to a much simpler, stripped-down version. The argument relies on a relative notion. You hear the difference, right? By stripping away the words heavily and purely, that second sentence just becomes a completely neutral statement of fact. Zero judgment. But that original sentence, it is literally dripping with evaluation. Heavily suggests the argument relies way too much on something, like it's totally off balance. And purely implies it blindly ignores other valid possibilities. In just 2 words, the speaker has completely undermined the argument without ever raising their voice or calling the theory wrong. Moving right along to Section 2, decoding evaluative adjectives. Okay, so adjectives are basically the building blocks of this hidden stance. Lecturers usually introduce topics using very standard neutral academic nouns. Things like impact, trend, or solution. But as a focus learner, your ears need to prick up the exact second an adjective attaches to one of those nouns. A neutral word like impact totally transforms when it becomes a significant impact or a minor impact. A basic solution suddenly becomes an achievable solution. The adjective is where the professor's stance actually lives. They're actively categorizing the concept for you, signaling whether it's a positive breakthrough or a problematic dead end. Imagine a student who just jots down the word solution in their notes, totally missing the fact that the professor actually called it an unworkable solution. Catching that one little adjective is quite literally the difference between getting an A and a C on your final essay. Let's look at a standard academic challenge. Determining this objective preference is difficult. Fair enough, that's a neutral statement about a tough process. Now listen to how one single word changes absolutely everything. Determining this supposedly objective preference is extremely difficult. Wow, just wow. Throwing in the word supposedly completely flips the credibility of the whole theory. The lecturer is signaling to you in real time, hey, other people call this objective, but I certainly don't buy it. If you miss that one word, you've missed the entire critical angle of the lecture. So as you're taking notes, you really need to be on the active lookout for 3 main categories of adjectives. First up, words like successful or achievable. These predict a positive possibility. It means the professor likes where this is heading. Second, words like ineffective, irrational, or unconvincing. These highlight a negative weakness. And here's a massive tip for you. When you hear a word from this negative category, that is your cue to draw a big red flag in your notes right next to that theory. The professor is practically handing you a critique on a silver platter. And finally, words that emphasize importance, like significant, crucial, or major. The big takeaway here is that catching these specific adjectives helps you map out the lecturer's true stance on the fly. Which brings us to Section 3, the power of adverbs. If adjectives tell you what the lecturer thinks, adverbs tell you exactly how strongly they think it. They modify those adjectives and verbs to shift the degree of certainty even further. Just listen to the difference between these two phrases. First, here it says that the committee hasn't decided. Pretty straightforward. Now the second. Here it simply says that the committee hasn't decided. That adverb, simply, acts as a very subtle judgment. The lecturer is looking right at the audience and basically saying there is absolutely nothing more to read into these findings. Don't overcomplicate it. It draws a firm boundary line directly around the facts. Or how about this one? The evidence is clear versus the evidence is convincingly clear. Adding convincingly creates this highly persuasive, almost aggressive stance. It takes an everyday observation and suddenly makes it seem impossible to doubt. It's the lecturer's way of saying, you can take this to the bank, do not question this part of the theory. It acts as a massive amplifier for the point they're driving home. Ultimately, adverbs are the primary indicators of a lecturer's degree of certainty, which, by the way, is a huge deal in academia. You see, academics kind of hate absolute certainty. Scholars are terrified of being proven wrong by later research, so they hedge. When a lecturer says something is apparently true, they're legally protecting themselves. They're saying it looks like the case, but it hasn't been conclusively proven, so don't quote me on it. If they say a theory works to some extent, they're warning you that this is only a tiny piece of the puzzle. Expect a massive but to follow immediately. Conversely, if they say results appear consistently, they're taking off the armor. They're building a strong, robust foundation. Adverbs tell you exactly how much trust you should place in the theory being presented. All right, Section 4, spotting spoken punctuation. So far, we've looked a lot at the vocabulary on the page, but lectures are a spoken medium, right? Sometimes the evaluation isn't just in the words themselves, it's in the physical, audio delivery of those words. Just like a writer uses bold text, italics, or commas to draw your eye, a speaker uses the mechanics of delivery to guide your brain. But a speaker can't exactly wave a yellow highlighter in the air. They have to use their voice. They use stress, hitting key evaluative words harder with their vocal cords. They use intonation, often using a falling pitch to signal the definitive end of a solid point. And they use pausing, taking a deliberate breath before and after important ideas to mentally frame a concept. Let's actually try a little experiment. Imagine a lecturer delivering this line to signal its absolute maximum importance. Listen to where the weight falls. And this talk is of particular relevance to students on business and psychology courses. You hear how the voice leans heavily into those specific words? That vocal stress is the lecturer essentially reaching right through the microphone, grabbing your pen, and underlining those concepts in your notebook for you. They're manually directing your attention to the highest value information in the room. Now let's look at pausing. It is incredibly powerful when used correctly. Just listen to the rhythm here, looking specifically at the talents, the particular qualities great business leaders appear to share. Those pauses, they aren't accidental. The speaker is carving out negative space around those evaluative words. It gives your brain a fraction of a second it needs to catch up and register that these are the most highly valued concepts in the sentence. It builds anticipation for what comes next. Finally, Section 5. Mastering active listening. Now, you might be wondering, why does all this matter? Why go to all this effort just to figure out a professor's subtle opinions? Well, decoding this language is the absolute bedrock of critical thinking. It allows you to instantly distinguish a lecturer's main argument from a passing, trivial supporting example. It helps you assess when a stance is actually unsupported or based on weak evidence. Remember that word supposedly? And, most importantly for you, recognizing spoken evaluation tells you exactly which theories have the highest credibility in the eyes of the person grading you. Citing a theory your professor secretly hates is a surefire way to lose marks. Knowing this hidden code means you know exactly which theories to confidently use in your own exams and essays. So, let's bring this all together into a simple, 4-step active listening toolkit that you can take into your very next lecture. Step 1, identify the core neutral concept. What's the baseline topic? Step 2, keep your ears wide open for the attached evaluative adjectives. Is it a major issue or a minor one? Step 3, catch the adverbs that shift the certainty. Is it convincingly true or just apparently true? And step 4, note the spoken punctuation. Listen to the rhythm of the room, noting exactly where the speaker pauses and which words they hit with heavy vocal stress. If you apply this decoder ring to lesson 56 and beyond, I promise you, You will never listen to a presentation the exact same way again. You'll move from passively recording dry facts to actively evaluating arguments right alongside the top experts in the room. So, the next time you sit down in a lecture hall, I challenge you. Listen far past the basic nouns and verbs and ask yourself the ultimate academic question. What is your professor really telling you? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and happy decoding.